Hi. So, if you don't live under a rock, you'll have noticed by now that BeamNG Update 0.30 has been released, and in the time since, after browsing many different BeamNG social media accounts, it's become apparent to me that BeamNG criticism is garbage. Much of it boils down to the same repetitive and vague complaints, are very ignorant and or inconsiderate, and are way too emotionally driven and biased towards negative thoughts, exaggerating issues and preventing mature discourse. This isn't ideal, and you know it too. So let's take a deep dive into what makes it so bad and how we can be better about this in the future. For starters, most of the complaints you'll see boil down to, oh, do this, do that, while not being precise in the slightest, which is even worse because people's wants tend to vary a lot. Obviously, the devs have an obligation to try and do some of what the community wants, but constantly throwing around random requests without consideration just isn't helpful at all. Many of them tend to be oddly specific, like exact vehicle types, years, configs, and all that stuff. Like, bro, the devs aren't going to add your exact automation creation, calm your These also tend to be very inconsiderate, which I'll get to later, because people tend to forget that none of this is that easy. Grumbling about why the devs won't completely shift the direction of their work and, oh, why won't you add a Lamborghini, isn't very helpful. Not at all. The devs have their own roadmap of stuff to do. They can't just immediately abandon it so they can add something else, or else that's a lot of wasted time on the board that I'm pretty sure the community wouldn't really like. Criticisms are also biased and exaggerated towards negative thoughts because people really like to get what they want, to a childish degree. That's because a vast majority of this community is children. Whoopee! That or just really immature. A good chunk of the community winds up struggling to be helpful when it comes to their criticisms, and chances are they'll only generate further useless anger that just harms the community. This puts even more pressure on the devs because so many people are looking at the development of BeamNG with tunnel vision as if everything has to be an if-or. And with that, the thing that really peeves me the most is that most criticisms are just so ignorant and or inconsiderate. So many criticisms I see are made on a complete whim, not putting into consideration stuff like development times, restraints, personnel, and whatever else. These exaggerated complaints that also cause many to ignore other pieces of work that the devs have put in, so pleasing you guys becomes even more of a chore. Oh, there's all this other stuff I can work with, but they added something I didn't want, so now I can't enjoy it. Oh, but this thing still sucks. There is so much that the devs are working on. So these constant pleas up the indicative of an increasingly impatient fanbase is irrational. 3 months just is not a long time for a game like this if it's not being overseen by, like, Microsoft or something. Stenyak, one of the devs, said it well. Regarding this, don't have too many hopes. We don't have several decades worth of entire teams of automotive engineers to work on designing the same real-life systems. These things are not trivial. We are only a simulation company. We don't have the resources to do the same or even better than what full car companies are doing. It's similar to having the AI not be dumb. You have Tesla with tons of engineers trying for years and years. We cannot hope to come even close to autopilot, even though that's commonly considered to be pretty bad. Oh, and did you hear that? He's directly referencing the hordes of complaints he gets about the AI. Why don't you work on the AI? The AI is so dumb. Why aren't you working on the AI? They have been since before you were born, you Stenyak has said similar stuff in regards to the UI, except even more thorough. There's no magic bullet, no simple solution. Parts of the UI have already been migrated to Vue. A big part of Career UI is made with Vue, for example, and there's more to be done. In any case, it uses CEF under the hood, where we're working on trying to achieve some optimizations. With some luck, the optimizations might actually work, but will likely be quite small impact. Optimizing it further, or replacing it entirely, is a complete different beast of a monumental task. So despite our ongoing efforts and research in that direction, I got advised to not hold your breath. Rest assured, we suffer the very same pain. We want a better, faster UI the same as anyone else in the community. We're doing what can be done within our means. Whether the CEF performance overhead is inherent or not depends on how much optimization we manage to squeeze out of it. Whatever much we manage to gain cannot be called inherent. Whether we're not able to optimize, then I guess you might say it was. And yes, integrating the CEF imagery with the render engine can be quite expensive. This is part of why our game UI is limited by default to 1080p UI resolution, to limit the amount of pixels we need to manage, which is one of the big factors driving down UI performance. Regarding switching from Angular to Vue, we have never once used Angular, but AngularJS. AngularJS has been abandoned, which puts it in a bad position. Vue happens to be more performant in many scenarios compared to AngularJS, so we hope to gain some snappiness on that front too. and a migration from Angular to Vue is less disruptive, more progressive than a migration from AngularJS to Angular, for example. The vehicle selector has to handle, I think, more than 1,000 vehicle variants. It's a ridiculous amount of data to begin with, and we are not considering mod support. Imagine the numbers of a mod hoarder. I wouldn't be surprised to see 2,000 to 10,000 variants in their UIs. How many cars do other games show in their vehicle selector? Still, the vehicle selector has received optimization effort over the years. I've personally spent a good amount of time optimizing the LUA backend of the vehicle select, shaving around 1 to 2 seconds of load time if I recall correctly. Other colleagues worked on the optimized scroller system, etc., but it's still a ton of data. And we're adding probably dozens more variants every year, so it's an uphill battle in addition to being a hard battle already. It's important to realize that sure, these technical discussions can be interesting. Questions like how to optimize this particular menu, how to optimize the whole UI, is a conversation we could have and that we're having internally more frequently than you might expect. A conversation that I would likely enjoy being a programmer myself. There's a number of ways to approach these problems, however lack of technical ideas is not the bottleneck, it's a lack of time, aka excess of other tasks. As a dev team, we must prioritize the thousands of tasks in our internal to-do list, some of which would be UI optimization. How important each task is, how much time we estimate it'll take, and how uncertain that estimation is. You juggle all those factors and all those tasks, then come up with a plan to use our limited resources as wisely as possible to get the best possible results on each update. Or in my previous words, we're doing what can be done within our means. I don't mean to shut down the conversation of how to optimize a UI or anything, I'm only trying to shed some light about why the currently ongoing improvements to the UI are not as impactful as we would all love them to be. Now, let's move on to some 0.30 specific stuff, as well as complaints about the last handful of updates because they haven't been the most well received of its kind. Yes, there are a lot of reasonable complaints in regards to them, but regardless, some of the worst takes always float to the top. For starters, 0.30 is not an off-roading update, and the whining about too much off-roading content has gotten irrational. Since 0.27, stuff like major career mode updates, additions to the map the career mode is on, VR implementation, one of the most highly requested vehicles in the game's history, greater car interactivity, a racetrack remaster, and modern car refreshes are huge for the game, but slip under the radar more than they should because, oh, they added an off-roader, now it hampers on my ability to enjoy the update, I guess. The addition of a UTV really shouldn't change that. There's still a lot of people enjoying the new parts of the game added this year in different ways than before, and just because you aren't doesn't make recent updates useless. This stuff isn't that easy. Not to mention, updates rarely ever follow a specific theme through all of its changes. 0.27 as a pure off-roading update is an outlier, not the norm. Quit thinking it is, please, because at that point you hardly know what you're criticizing. Like people confused as to why 0.30 wasn't a utility update. Oh, and speaking of utility update, one of my main culprits for the irrationality I see is BeamNG update speculation. But I'll spare you the details for it, because that's got its own video coming sometime soon. So, where can we improve upon all of this? What should you do? Well, at the very least, you should stay civil and mature. Most complaints generate unnecessary and unneeded community tension and anger, which in turn generates a more hostile and less helpful community, as I mentioned about 2,000 times now. Take development times and the devs' words into consideration and be more mindful of other people's experiences. Maybe even try it out yourself and recognize actual issues the game has while also taking into account what the devs have done recently that actually warrant praise. I have mentioned it a million times, but remastered cars have outnumbered new ones. Recognize a varying dev team size and the fact that different people work on different things. Lastly, recognize that a harder-to-please fanbase like BeamNG is showing will only lead to greater stress and pressure to get these things out. Things like tire thermals are extremely complicated and cannot be done in one night, 1 week, 1 month, or even 1 year, so don't rush them because you will not like it and then you will complain more. Of course, none of this is to say that the devs are perfect and that they deserve no criticism. They definitely could have handled 0.28's messy launch better. The new ETKs have a good amount of handling issues and could have some work put on adjusting its downforce. The Sport Plus 2R tires fitted on many performance cars are exceptionally understeery. Cars like the Chinchilla are hindered when uncustomized due to issues with some of the tuning and parts, like differentials. That's a lot of reasonable stuff to complain about, not too much off-roader. In conclusion, well, I don't have too much to say. You'll probably get it already if you managed to watch this far, so be mindful of your requests, try to be knowledgeable, or be humble if you aren't, and be smart. Please. For now, I'm just looking forward to 0.31, so have a good one, ladies and gentlemen.